"Fly this jet, then we'll talk." The words didn't just echo across the polished marble lave of the Manhattan corporate tower. They sliced through the air like a blade. Every head turned. Coffee cups froze halfway to lips. The security guards by the glass doors stiffened. And standing there, in scuffed boots and a faded mechanic's jacket, was a man who looked like he'd stepped into the wrong world. If that had been you, humiliated in front of 100 strangers, your child's future hanging on a thread, would you have swallowed your pride and walked away, or would you have stepped forward anyway? Marcus Hale didn't look like a man who belonged in the headquarters of Caldwell Aeronautics. The building gleamed with chrome and glass, a monument to billion-dollar deals and polished egos. Marcus carried a canvas duffel bag and the exhaustion of too many sleepless nights. His brown hair was flecked with gray, not from age but from strain. His hands were calloused, the knuckles cracked from years of turning wrenches. He was 39, but grief had added 10 more. Across the lobby, towering over everyone in a tailored Navy suit, stood Richard Caldwell, CEO of Caldwell Aeronautics, one of the largest private aviation manufacturers in the United States. His company's jets were the pride of the skies, flown by celebrities, politicians, and billionaires. Richard's smile was sharp, practiced, and cruel. Marcus had come because of a letter printed on thick cream paper with the Caldwell insignia embossed at the top. It had offered him a position, senior flight systems engineer, pending final review. It had been the first glimmer of hope in years. The job meant health insurance for his 8-year-old son, Owen. It meant tuition paid at the small private academy that specialized in helping children with speech delays. It meant maybe, just maybe, not choosing between medication and rent again. But now, standing beneath the chandelier in that lobby, Marcus realized the letter hadn't been an offer. It had been a test. Richard Caldwell had heard rumors. The single dad mechanic from Wichita who claimed he'd once flown experimental aircraft for the Air Force before life fell apart. Richard liked dominance. He liked watching people squirm. So he laughed, loudly. "You want to work here? You think you can design for my jets? Fly one. Prove you belong in my sky." People shifted awkwardly. Some smirked. Some pitied him. Marcus felt heat crawl up his neck, but he didn't lower his eyes. He thought of Owen sitting in their tiny kitchen that morning, trying to sound out the word astronaut. He thought of the way his son's small fingers had gripped his sleeve and whispered, "You're the best pilot ever, Dad." Marcus inhaled slowly. The marble floor reflected his worn boots. When? The laughter died a little. Richard hadn't expected that. The CEO tilted his head, amused. "Tomorrow, private runway and White Plains. Dawn. You handle a Falcon X prototype, no co-pilot. If you can get her up and back without embarrassing yourself, maybe we'll talk employment." Maybe. That word echoed louder than the mockery. Marcus nodded once. He turned and walked out of the building with what little dignity he had left. That night, in their one-bedroom apartment in Queens, Marcus sat at the edge of Owen's bed. The room smelled faintly of laundry detergent and old books. Glow-in-the-dark stars dotted the ceiling. Owen's sandy hair fell into his eyes as he looked up from his picture book. "Did you get the job?" Marcus swallowed. "Not yet." Owen's shoulders dipped. He had already learned disappointment too young. "They want me to fly a jet tomorrow." Owen's eyes widened. "A real one?" "A real one." "Like the ones in the sky?" Marcus smiled softly. "Exactly like those." Owen grinned in a way that broke Marcus's heart. "You'll win." Win. As if this were a game. After Owen fell asleep, Marcus sat at the kitchen table with a stack of old photographs. One showed him in an Air Force flight suit, standing beside a test aircraft in Nevada. He had been younger then, fearless, married to a woman named Rachel whose laughter filled rooms. But Rachel had died in a car accident when Owen was 2. Grief had crushed Marcus. He'd left the Air Force shortly after, unable to focus, unable to climb into cockpits without seeing flashing red lights and twisted metal in his mind. Bills piled up. Depression hollowed him out. He took mechanic jobs, anything that kept food on the table. And now this. The runway in White Plains was cold and silver at dawn. A thin mist hung over the asphalt. The Falcon X prototype gleamed under floodlights, sleek and powerful, its engines quiet but humming with potential. Executives stood near the hangar doors, coffee in hand. Richard Caldwell watched like a king awaiting entertainment. Marcus approached the jet slowly. His fingers brushed the metal fuselage. For a moment, doubt crept in like an old enemy. It had been 7 years since he'd commanded something this advanced. 7 years since he'd trusted himself in the sky. Richard's voice carried across the runway. "Don't worry, we've got insurance." A few chuckles rippled. Marcus climbed the ladder into the cockpit. The scent of leather and electronics enveloped him. The dashboard lit up in soft blues and greens. His hands rested on the controls, trembling slightly. What if he failed? What if he froze? What if Owen lost this chance because his father couldn't conquer his own ghosts? He closed his eyes. He remembered Rachel's voice telling him he was braver than he believed. He remembered Owen's tiny arms around his neck. The engines roared to life. Inside the hangar, some executives leaned forward, suddenly more interested than they'd intended to be. The jet taxied smoothly. Marcus's breathing steadied with each checklist completed from memory. His mind shifted into the precise, disciplined rhythm of flight training long ingrained in him. Then came the moment. He pushed the throttles forward. The Falcon X surged down the runway. The acceleration pressed him back into the seat. Asphalt blurred beneath him, and then, lift. The wheels left the ground. The jet climbed, slicing through morning mist into a sky painted pink and gold. Up there, the world grew quiet. Marcus felt something inside him unlock. The fear that had chained him since Rachel's death loosened its grip. The sky didn't feel like a graveyard anymore. It felt like home. He leveled at 10,000 feet, testing responsiveness, banking left, then right. The Falcon handled beautifully, but Marcus pushed her just enough to reveal her limits. Subtle vibrations at high speed, a minor delay in throttle calibration. He noted everything. On the ground, Richard Caldwell's confidence wavered as the jet executed a flawless barrel roll not even requested in the test plan. 40 minutes later, Marcus guided the Falcon back toward the runway. His landing was smooth, controlled, almost gentle. When the wheels kissed asphalt, silence blanketed the observers. Marcus powered down and descended the ladder. Richard approached, his smile thinner now. "Lucky flight." Marcus met his gaze evenly. "Your throttle lag at high acceleration will cost you clients, and your left stabilizer vibrates at extreme banking. It needs recalibration before full production." The chief engineer nearby paled. Those issues had been quietly noted, but not solved. Richard stared at him, realization dawning. This wasn't a desperate mechanic pretending to be a pilot. This was a man who had once lived in the sky. But Marcus wasn't finished. "You built beautiful machines," he said calmly, "but you forgot the people who fly them." The words struck harder than any insult. Later that afternoon, Marcus received a formal offer. Double the original salary, full benefits, relocation assistance. Richard Caldwell himself signed it. But something had shifted in the CEO too. Over the next months, Marcus didn't just work. He transformed the culture of Caldwell Aeronautics Engineering Division. He listened to junior staff. He shared credit. He spoke openly about failure and recovery. Slowly, the company's atmosphere softened. Richard watched from a distance at first. Then, gradually, he began asking Marcus for input, not about jets, but about leadership. One evening, months later, Richard found Marcus in the hangar long after everyone had gone home. "You never told me why you left the Air Force," Richard said quietly. Marcus wiped grease from his hands. "My wife died. I couldn't breathe in a cockpit without thinking I'd lose control again." Richard nodded slowly. "And now?" Marcus looked at the jet before them. "Now I fly for my son." At home, Owen thrived. His speech improved. He joined a small aviation club for kids. The first time he watched his father's company jet streak across the sky, he shouted to anyone who would listen that his dad helped build that. Years later, at a company gala in Chicago, Richard took the stage before hundreds of employees. He cleared his throat. "I once told a man to fly a jet before I'd speak to him. I thought I was testing his skill. I was really exposing my own arrogance. He looked toward Marcus in the crowd. That takeoff exposed more than talent. It exposed strength I didn't understand. The strength of a father who refused to let humiliation define him. The room rose in applause. Marcus felt Owen's hand slip into his. If you've ever been mocked, underestimated, or told you don't belong, what would you have done? Would you have walked away? Or would you have found the courage to rise? Before this story ends, tell me in the comments, have you ever faced a moment where everything depended on one leap of faith? Marcus once stood in a marble lobby with nothing but hope and worn boots. He walked out humiliated. He walked back the next morning and took to the sky, not for pride, not for revenge, but for love. And sometimes that kind of love is stronger than any engine ever built. If this story truly touched your heart, if it reminded you of the power of second chances, of quiet resilience, of fathers who fight battles no one sees, please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing so more people can carry this message of hope forward.